everyone. Welcome to this new episode of From Moment to Movement with Tamara Banks, that's me, where stories inspire change. On this episode, I have got something really special for you. I had the blessing and the honor to sit down one-on-one with Dr. Bernice King. She's the youngest of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King's children. We talked about everything from the Voting Rights Act and how that's being dismantled, and following your calling. Check out this interview. I think you'll enjoy it, and then let me know. Dr. Bernice King, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. I appreciate it. One of the things that's top of mind that everybody's sort of talking right now is the Voting Rights Act and how that Supreme Court decision in Louisiana is impacting that. Just to get that out of the way so we can talk about other fun stuff. How does that Supreme Court decision, is it really impacting? It could impact?
Definitely it could impact. More importantly, it's not the decision, it's what people do with the decision. Mm-hmm. And we know there are a number of governors, state legislators, who are looking at an opportunity to create, new lines to advantage in this case, partisanship, to make sure that they have strong representation. And oftentimes, the guise of partisanship, you're talking about perhaps impact on Black, brown communities. Mm-hmm. And so it is going to have an impact as long as, people who are intent on continuing to carve out people in our society are doing the work that they're doing. That's why it's very important that we be more vigilant in not just voting, but being aware and attentive to our city, county, board, state, legislative bodies, and as well as federal. I think what happens is, as the citizenry, we've historically been seen by those running for office for the most part as a vote, as opposed to a member of my human family, and I represent that member, Congress, city council, the school board, etc. But when we demand to be treated as citizens who are impacted by these policies and become more aligned and connected to and holding them accountable, they don't get away with as much. And so we have to organize, we have to mobilize in ways that we haven't previously, which means we got to be a little bit more strategic in how we galvanize communities when these kind of things happen. I was listening to Sherilyn Ifill, former head of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, talk about what we do now. One of the things she mentioned is not only do we need to look at reform as it relates to the Supreme Court, which everybody knows that's not going to be easy. It's got to be well thought out. But she talked about how it's going to have to be more of a saturation in voting. Mm-hmm. This time we got to kind of overwhelm the system, so that hopefully any kind of impact that people thought they would get by manipulating new lines won't happen. So yeah, it's very concerning because the marginalized, historically marginalized communities now going to be even further, marginalized in a place where we have been able to make so much progress, and still have a lot of work to do, so that what people are dealing with, these real difficult social and economic issues, that we can begin to create the right kinds of policies that allow people to flourish, and that we look at policies, because I think we're moving sometimes so fast that very few of us are thinking about the policies that are still there that need kind of correcting, perhaps, or removing. Because some of what's happening now, they've been able to take advantage of stuff sitting on the books. And we haven't gone back in to look at these things. I think we get comfortable with progress and we think we're, fine, or if we got certain people in office, we think we're fine, and that's a word of caution. Don't get satisfied because, oh, my candidate won, so I'm good. No, 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 no. Mother says struggle is a never-ending process. Freedom is never really won. You earn it and win it in every generation. So it doesn't matter who's in office. Struggle is a never-ending process. Why is that? That's because there's always going to be some type of evil and insidiousness in the world we live in. The magnitude of it will depend on our vigilance. You know, that's why Daddy even said that the tragedy still of human history is that the children of darkness are often more zealous and determined than the children of light. So our zeal and our determination has to remain in a consistent, organized fashion. We can't let up, in other words. You know, we can't say, whew, thank God.
Right. We're
You
done.
know, you can do that for a moment, but you got to get right back at it as a whole. I mean, you know, here and there, you know, people have to take breaks, moments, vacations, whatever. But the infrastructure, the structure of it, of organizing and mobilizing and strategizing and playing can't stop.
That's a great segue into, I wanted to talk to you about your calling, a person's calling.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people, as you know, will go to work 10, 8 hours a day, what have you, and they say, well, when I retire, I'm going to do
Right.
whatever. But if that's your calling, if that's what God's asked you to do your calling, and the money and taking care of what you need to take care of will come. Can you just speak a little bit about how important it is to really find your calling and really address it and really to go for it?
I think it's extremely important, number one, for focus, for fuel, because regardless of the trajectory of your life, as long as you know whatever you're called to do, you're in the space and place that that's being fulfilled. Because otherwise, you just go to and fro, and you get driven by, you know, money, paying the bills. You know, it's just real. I just got to do something. But I think first of all, everything is energy. You know, every word we speak, every thought we think, there's energy behind all of that. I see that now more than ever as I've continued to mature. And so if you have a calling and your mindset is focused on that, is grounded in that, I believe things either come to you or you end up coming upon, you know, and you don't have to be struggling to figure out the money of it. Don't look for a profession or career because you could end up in an industry that has nothing to do with whatever. You know, let's say you, even in communications, if you went to school for communications, journalism, whatever, there are various industries that can be used in, and you don't have to confine yourself to the narrowness of what's traditionally said. And so when you understand your calling to that, why am I in journalism? Not just I want to be a lawyer. Why am I a lawyer? So it's important to know the why of what you're doing. And so that at every point in your life, you can answer back, is this answering why I am in this, doing this? Because of my purpose, it speaks to my purpose. So if it doesn't fit there, you can realign. And it gives your life much more meaning. Uh, it's nothing like a purpose-driven life.
Right.
You know, because at the end, you don't, in the words of Reverend Gerald Durley, you don't retire, you rewire.
I love that. Yes, yes, yes. I like to use evolving. I'm evolving.
Yeah.
And we always see what would you, when people were asking people, my husband and I talk about this all the time, what would you do if you had all the money in the world and have to worry about bills? And whatever that answer is, that's your calling. Then you're not driven by, the dollar.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's also, we talked about how owning our own is important. And we all talk about that in the Black community, owning your own restaurant, your own business, your own whatever it is. And where there are a number of Black owned banks in the South and throughout the U.S., but there's a new effort that you're helping Ashley Bell with, the Redemption Bank.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us how that's going to be different from what we know today of Black owned banks.
Well, the first difference is we sit in a very white community. There's no bank that I know that's a Black bank that does not sit in the Black community.
Mm-hmm.
We were able to attract white investors and remain a black-owned bank. Qualify as that. Uh, we were able to attract people who were willing to put the money in, and still allow us to be minority owned without any voting say. That's rare and unheard of, as you know. So that's the first thing. Um, Utah has, their banking regulations have a little more flexibility than most states. For instance, in most states, you have to live in the state to be a board member. In Utah, you don't. That's very important when you're talking about banking, because to be able to bring the minds and thoughts from different places, outside, because, every state is different, you know. It's different over in the West than it is over here in the South, climate-wise, not literally just geographically, but uh, it's it's something different in the culture of the climate in every state. And so, being able to bring those different, thought leaders around, how you continue to grow and expand that bank. Of course, you're under regulations, but, you have much greater opportunity in a place like Utah to really do some things. And in this case, our commitment, we're a black bank, but we're a bank that believes, in humanity and opportunity and access, wherever that not access doesn't happen. Now, there's a sensitivity to understanding that one of the ways that people develop wealth is through one, home ownership, two, small businesses that you just talked about, ownership. Our bank is the only bank that originates small business loans, and that's because of Ashley's background as being the Southeast Regional person over the Small Business Administration for a couple of years. He learned some things working for that and brought that into our bank. So that gives us an opportunity to infuse more capital in those that are interested in starting banks or even working together collectively to do work. The thing I like about this effort that we have, is I tell people I own a bank. So even though I don't have my own restaurant, I own something. And that's the other part of it. Yes, we need more ownership in the black community. It doesn't have to be individual though. So this gives us an opportunity to infuse into people that may be trying to do some enterprising stuff as business owners. And it's so important when we're talking about helping to even out the playing field. If we don't continue to provide opportunities that understand where things are economically now, we're gonna be in serious trouble, because if we don't do anything different, if we don't provide greater opportunity and access, if our community doesn't become much more astute economically about a lot of things, then our wealth is gonna sit at zero. And what does that mean? We're gonna descend, we're gonna lose a lot of ground. So I think it's very important to have institutions like this that can be sensitive to hear and understand and meet those needs.
It's also important to have organizations like this, Martin Luther King Jr. Nonviolent Center. When we talk about strategies, we were talking earlier, do young people kind of get it about the nonviolent piece in terms of solving problems? Are they missing it?
I think we're all missing it. It is human nature when ugly, mean, hurtful, harmful things happen. We want people to pay. Like when I say pay, I don't mean you don't hold people accountable for that. They want them to hurt, be harmed, feel the same level of pain that you felt. Nonviolence teaches you to expose injustice, and create mechanisms for accountability that respect the dignity of an individual. For instance, even if people have to pay for something through legal means, through the legal system, even if they have to serve time, how we treat that person along the way, we shouldn't be like, yeah, they should have gotten their head beat up. see how they beat them people up. They should get their head beat up along the way. Um, that's not what nonviolence is about. Nonviolence is about creating just and fair circumstances and outcomes. And that means even your adversary in that process has to be considered. So it doesn't mean they get to continue doing unjust things. But again, it means you don't want to do something that you're trying to defeat them or harm them because it doesn't, it, it's counterproductive.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hard for people to get.
Yeah.
And so, you know, what we try to start with first is to help people understand this notion of us being interrelated, interdependent, interconnected. You know, let's not start with nonviolence versus violence first and dive in. Let's start it in the reality of the world. We're so interrelated, interconnected, and interdependent. That dictates our decision making, our pathway. So if we understand that, you know, that's why Daddy said hate can't drive out hate, because at the end of the day, you still have to coexist with people in this world. And hate just grows more hate and more hate. So if you're reacting that way, we're still keeping hate in place. So you have to create conditions and circumstances so that what is in a human being, most human beings, I'm saying all, can be appealed to, you know. And so that, because people get to these evil places, they weren't there when they were born. Right. They either were in an environment where they were exposed to something, or something negative could have happened to them, and they held on to that. So that's on top of what's really deep underneath, which is that sense of spark of the divine, as Daddy would say, in that person. So you want to expose some things so that even they can begin to see, oh Lord, I'm acting out of who I really should be and was created to be. So it takes a lot of discipline for that. But more importantly, it helps to keep you clear in decision making. You don't want to make just impulsive decisions or just emotional decisions, because the consequences could be even great. Even if somebody did something to you, if you strike back out, let's just say they did something to you, they started it, so to speak, as a young person, they started it. And then you try to behave like them, but you do more harm and damage to them, perhaps. They end up being brain dead and die. They hurt you bad. Now they're dead. Now you have to deal with that. It just muddies the waters. Yeah. So teaching people the power of nonviolence, how to properly protect yourself, how to think about, the best decision in light of all the facts and circumstances, how to regulate your emotions, because they're real. You're going to feel them. Nobody's saying ignore them. Right. But how do you rechannel them so that you can get to a constructive outcome? What is that outcome? Where are you trying to get? And practically, let's take this road. Will it get you there? How will it get you there? This road, this road, this road. And we find that nonviolence, through the study, the practices of it, when you're grounded in the principles and steps of it, gets you to the best outcome that is more just, fair, humane, and equitable. And it doesn't mean it's absolute, because it's something that we have to practice every day, every single solid day, every day, sometimes moment to moment.
Yeah, exactly.
But at the core is dignity. You want to respect people's dignity. You want them to respect your dignity. And so that's what has helped me to embrace it. The whole interrelated, interconnected, interdependence, the dignity of people. That has really helped me to understand it better than, I ain't gonna do this because somebody hit me, I'm gonna hit them back. Because I honor the humanity of people regardless of who they are.
Yeah. I know you're busy, so I'm gonna let you go. Just one last question. Like you said, sometimes it's moment to moment. How do you keep going on moment to moment and creating this whole space and holding space for people, that we can create a movement out of a moment and not make it a worse situation? What keeps you going day to day, getting up every day?
Whew. Um, Going back to your earlier question, calling, purpose. You know, I understand that I've been called to this space to call people up and into who they're supposed to be, to create environments and circumstances that people's dignity can be respected and regarded, and they can flourish in life. Um, Knowing that I come from a family that were, you know, fighters, not in the sense of violence, but they fought for what was right. They stood for what was right. Um, that's in my blood, you know. And so every time I feel like, whew, I don't know how they did it, you know, I just get reminded, you know, over and over again that they were me one day. And ironically, now I'm them. Because when I say they were me one day before they got to this movement, they were growing up, you know, living life, even though my daddy was more focused on why certain conditions and really looking, you know, for an answer in this world to these problems that kept him separated from those early friends he had as a child that were taken away from him. Um, that was very devastating. And so they were those people who came into this way of living through nonviolence. Now I'm them facing the circumstances they were able to use that in. And we have to take what they lived through and how they utilize it and use it in our time. And who's going to do it? So what gets me up is to realize my parents gave a lot, and I lost out on a lot. So to redeem it, I got to keep it going to make it all worth it, to make sense that if I was going to lose my parents to get to this point and quit, no, I got to keep moving to honor the sacrifice that they made.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. I appreciate you sharing. I really appreciate your time too, and all the work that you're doing in the world.
Thank you.
God bless you.
God bless you.
Bye-bye.